Okay, folks. Now, like I told you, in order for me to see these great bands, I had to go all the way to New York City and take two trains and subways. It took 2 hours to get there. There was nothing on Long Island that had bands like CBGB's and Max's Kansas City had. It was all hammerheads and OBI, places filled with goose down jackets and beer drinkers watching cover bands and listening to Billy Joel and Harry Chapin. I had enough of it. I wanted to see the Ramones and Patti Smith. And there it was in Roslyn. Used to be a bowling alley. It was a place called My Father's Place. And we could drive there in 35 minutes from East Islip and find a place to park. Good luck. And we would walk over there and go in, and there it was. Every band we loved in New York City was available right there on Long Island. And the guy that made that happen is with me today. Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome for Michael Eppy Epstein. How are you, Eppy?
Hello, Stephen.
Is that a true introduction?
That was wonderful. Thank you.
I mean, it's true. Back then, I mean, I'm 63, so I remember back in the mid 70s, you had to go to New York City to see these bands. There
You
wasn't
actually,
anything
you
like it.
actually didn't. I hate to interrupt you, but you
Uh oh.
actually didn't, because I'd like to think that I had the chutzpah, as we say in Italian, to to try things first before other clubs. My
Oh.
father's place was open before the Bottom Line. My father's place was open before CBGB's,
Oh.
and I got to tell you that we were doing a lot of music that CBGB's uh, was doing, but there was no record deal, so that we would take the advantage of the fact that Hilly was developing these acts, and Hilly did a Monday night called CBGB's at my father's place. We'd
I
bring
remember.
three acts out, and he would host the show. And Hilly, who owned CBGB's kids, he would say, "Well, we're not in the Bowery. We're here in Long Island, and this is not CBGB's. This is my father's place. We're going to make it feel like the Bowery." And for $5, you could see Blondie, the Talking Heads, and one other less known band.
Wow. I didn't know that. See, I'm talking about 1976 by the time I came
Well, this
around.
was '74.
Okay, so it was a little before me. I didn't know that you guys were first, and I apologize. I know you opened
That's
in
okay. That's
71.
okay. The thing was is that my father's place barometer for new talent was based on record releases. If you didn't have a record out, it was very hard for you to play my father's place, whether it was comedy, rock, blues, jazz, folk, or reggae.
Hmm.
That was the underlining factor, because people were buying records then. And until Napster, there was a line in the sand, and people were still buying records up until not Napster. Do you know what date Napster was created?
That's probably the mid 80s.
No, it was in the '90s.
Was it the 90s?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that destroyed everything. I mean, I go back before.
Ask one of your listeners and viewers if they know when Napster came to be. It'd be interesting if someone's talking to you.
I will. No, well, we're not live, but I will ask him
Okay.
later.
All right.
You're probably right. It probably is the early 90s or mid 90s. I'm sure you're correct. But
I was
anyway, my
working for
father's
Little
place.
Steven. I was working for Little Steven creating the Underground Garage when it happened. So I know it was the
Wow.
'90s.
Yeah. But I saw so many great bands at my father's place. My most memorable show was the Plasmatics. That was insane. Uh,
Well, she was way ahead of herself as a performer.
yes.
The idea that she had taken everything she had learned as a burlesque dancer to a rock and roll stage, and the songs were pretty good.
Yeah.
Uh, it's unfortunate that because there's a big wall of sound, she couldn't appreciate the songs. They're now being appreciated. They're being looked at now, and people are studying. What Wendy O was doing then, but it's a sad shame that she's gone.
Yes, absolutely. And I somehow remember the guitar player banging his head against his guitar. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he used a chainsaw for something, maybe
No,
chopping
no,
the
he
guitar in
didn't use
half.
the chainsaw. Wendy did. She would
When?
she would cut up the cars
Yes,
or televisions or guitars on stage.
that's
She'd
right.
sew them up. And an interesting note about that band: the bass player of that band, who was the uh, black bass player who had a big afro. Do you remember him?
I think
His name
so.
was John Bouvier, and
Oh,
John Bouvier produced one of the most famous Ramones albums. See if one of your viewers can tell you which one it is. We'll make it
John
quick.
Bouvier. It couldn't have been Rocket to Russia because that was probably Craig Leon. Maybe it was a later one.
It was a later one. You'll find out.
I'll have to look that up. That's a good.
John Bouvier was the CEO for Little Steven and his company called, before we did Underground Garage, it was called Solidarity. So John came and ran his office for him.
Wow.
But he also was a great record producer, and he's most well known for living in Roseville and being the bass player in the Plasmatics.
Wow. I remember the guitar player had a mohawk. I remember him.
The bass player had a mohawk also.
Oh, they both have mohawks.
But he was black, and it was interesting to see an Afro-American having a mohawk.
That's true. I also saw there at my father's place, the Police do I believe it was their first show in the U.S. It was either you or the Bottom Line hosted them first, because I went to both.
Well, you didn't see the first show, because the first show was a year before the record came out. And the story there was very simple. I'm a reggae enthusiast, had a reggae record company in 1973 called EPPY Records. And I was always looking for artists that could sing reggae in a language that I could understand, because I did not understand patois yet. And my associate David Barham, who was going to law school at Hofstra and running Calderon Theater, and was working as my assistant / became my partner, was in bed with the assistant to the program director of WLIR. Her name was Margaret La Cicera, and she was a very cute little 17-year-old. And Margaret, because she was the assistant music director, would get 50 albums a week. And so David and Margaret were listening at 3 a.m. to some records, and there was a record on A&M in England called No Wave. And one of the songs on that compilation was Roxanne by the Police. It was a reggae version of Roxanne. And so he called me up on the phone at 3:30, 4 in the morning. I was listening to it on the phone. I said, I'll meet you at the station. I drove from Roslyn to Hempstead. They were in, I guess, somewhere close to West Hempstead, or somewhere close to the station. They met me there. I played Roxanne 5 times at 5 in the morning, and then Dennis McNamara wouldn't talk to me for about 3 weeks. However, they continued to play the import until it became Screamer of the Week, which forced A&M Records to put an album out. But prior to that album being finished, I did a little tour with them in a station wagon, which I booked and tour managed. And there were only 30 people in the club because people didn't know who the act was. For the reason I mentioned earlier in your cast, that unless there was a record being played on the radio, we really didn't have much interest in it. So there wasn't a lot of people there. The show you might have seen was been a year later, when they were finishing their little Northeast portion of the tour, and they were finishing the tour up on Sting's birthday, and we did the live radio broadcast, which is available on sugarmegs.org /WLIR, or you can probably find it somewhere on the World Wide Web.
Of course, yes. Well, I do remember seeing the Police. The album was out, you're correct, because Roxanne hit like a ton. It was so popular. And it was a great show, and I remember they played the whole album, and at the end they said, we don't have any more songs. And they played Roxanne again, but like a punkier version. And then they came back for the encore, and they did My Generation and Sunshine of Your Love. I remember the show because it was such
They did some covers because they ran out of songs.
They ran out of songs.
There was one song on this compilation record, and they weren't really prepared to go out and tour. And it just became an overnight hit, thanks to one little radio station in Hempstead, Long Island.
WLIR.
Because it took a long time for everyone else to play the record.
You're right.
So they played that show on Sting's birthday. And the next time they came to Long Island, they sold out the Coliseum 6 months later.
Oh, yeah, that was a meteoric rise for them.
So, the star-making machinery was very well greased at that time in the mid-'80s. and acts were just playing the club once or twice and then playing the Coliseum.
Right, right. That's right. I also another memorable show I'll never forget from there was John Kale and Link Ray opened. I saw that at my father's place. That was another great show. And I remember you had an early show and a late show. Did you always have two shows?
No, just I think as more and more clubs opened up on Long Island with the success of 92.7,
Mhm.
I think there were less people to come and see shows.
Okay.
And then you had, and when the 80s happened and the dance craze started, then you had the bigger rooms like Malibu with Spit and 007
Hmm.
and others, so that we lost a lot of those people, so that we went from two shows to one show.
Right, right. I do remember two shows. Who else did I see? David Johansen, the Tom Robinson Band, Hall and Oates. I've seen a lot of bands at my father's place, and it was a
Hall and
great.
Oates started at my father's place. They didn't
Oh,
have a
did they?
record. They didn't have a record out yet. A
Mm.
girlfriend of mine, Aileen Sanders from Westbury, was in Central Park, and she saw these two very pretty boys playing guitars. She said, "Why don't you invite them to come play?" Thinking of something probably more than their music. And at the time, the club had just opened in 71, 72. We did that. They were just putting an album out because they were discovered by Tommy Mottola, who was working
Yeah,
at his girlfriend's father's company, which was a music publishing house called Chapel Music. And so he eventually married her, and her father died. He was running it until he became president of Columbia Records. But
of course.
that was one of his first acts, and so they played twice without a record deal. And then when Hall Oates came out, uh, LIR played it to death, and then we did radio broadcasts. So I think there are 4 or 5 live radio broadcasts of John Oates and Daryl Hall from my father's place,
Yeah, yeah.
or
I
from
think
the
so.
Ultrasonic Studios, which we did shows in the 70s before my father's place did the live radio broadcast.
So would you say
You know anything
WLAR?
about the Ultrasonic Recording Studios or the Calderon Theater? You haven't talked about those places.
Oh, I remember the Calderon. Of course, I
Well,
went
right
there a
across
lot.
the street from the Calderon was a recording studio called Ultrasonic Studios,
Okay.
where some very famous people made their records. And on Tuesday nights, the LAR would take over the entire studio, and we'd do a live broadcast. And we did that starting in 1971 up until 73, when in fact the record industry was so in supply and demand, needed more songs, so that the studio couldn't give us the entire day to rehearse, and they couldn't break it down. So that's when we put the phone lines into Roslyn, and the first show we did was with another young man who didn't play anywhere else on Long Island until my father's place, which was a guy named Bruce Springsteen. I'm kidding, Bruce Springsteen.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm gonna get calls from that from John Landau. Appy, you know his name. Anyway, continue. So that was the first live radio broadcast from my father's place in 1973. Not the first
Wow.
time he played, however. That was the third time he played.
Wow. And you all of these recordings are available online? I gotta shut my
No,
dog up. Shut.
don't hit him. Don't hit
I'm
him.
gonna just yell at him. That's it.
Okay. No, not all of them are online. There are
Okay.
180 that are available on sugarmegs.org.
Sugar Megs, MEGS.
Yes, like Sugar Magnolia from the Dead.
Oh, Mags, MAGS.
Sugar Mags.
Sugarmags.com.
Right.
.org.
.org, and you put in /WLAR, my father's place broadcast. I mean, there's over 10,000 or 15,000 live broadcasts, but there's only 130 of my shows.
Wow. Oh, I got to check that out. Hope my listeners check that out too.
And
That's
if you have
great.
trouble finding it, that's Peter Hedemann's site, and you know Peter Hedman.
Oh, yes. I know that name very well.
Hello, Peter.
Well, that's great. I mean, I'm always curious to know. I mean, was it difficult? I mean, right now it's difficult. Original music right now is very difficult to sell. Everybody wants to go to what they already know. Was it as difficult back then to get audiences to come, or did they have a
No,
following?
no, they didn't have a following. As I told you, the Police had 30 people. Bruce Springsteen had 25 people.
Huh.
When the Ramones played the first time, there were 15 people there.
Wow.
No one knew who they were.
Right.
So that's another cute story. At some point, I'll tell you if you pay me enough money. Uh, but when you got a record played on the radio, you had an audience. No one had to see you. There was no MTV yet.
Right.
But if you
Exactly.
had a song on the radio, it would get played in repetition, and you fell in love with that song. And that's why there was LAR music. We called them heritage songs, like a band
Oh,
called Kashagugu, who had a song called Too Shy.
of
You wouldn't hear
course.
that anywhere else on any other radio station, even if they were a progressive or a new wave radio station. No one
Right.
played that song. That's a song that it is, as I say, indigenous to 92.7 FM, Long Island, New York.
I listen to
There are
LAR
other
all the time.
songs like those,
Mhm.
but you probably could go on sites and find all the one hit wonders that there were. Although Kasha Google had 3 songs. Excuse me, I'm not trying to.
Well, the 80s was a lot of one-hit wonders because they, like you said, they had that Scream of the Week, Dare to Be
But
Different.
Screamer in the Week didn't mean one song of the week.
Right. But it was the
The
song that
Police
most
had
requested.
every single song on the first Police album was a Screamer of the Week. Every single song on the first the second U2 album was a Screamer of the Week,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. Every song got to be Screamer of the Week. There
Mhm.
were songs that were one hit wonders that were Screamers of the Week as well, though. But
Right.
it wasn't a one hit wonder contest.
True.
It
I
was a
agree.
contest of the audience calling in because there were no fax machines,
Mhm.
except if you had a telex machine, and and uh, and people had to call, and so you had 20 kids manning the airline, and they would pick up and you'd vote for the best new song of the week,
Wow. What a great
and
concept.
each radio jock would mentor the song of the week that they loved. Vote for my screamer of the week. And
That's
Ben
right.
Manola would pick one, and Malibu Sue would pick one,
Yes,
and
I
Larry the
remember
Duck
that.
would pick one, and Sue
Wow.
McCann would sing that Malibu, et cetera, et cetera.
I remember that. That's amazing. Now, then after my father's place, I remember seeing Graham Parker at a little place called Friend of the Farmer. Didn't you run that for a little bit?
Friend of the Farmer was a place in Roslyn that
Right.
had been a luncheonette and ice cream factory since the early 20s.
Hmm.
And a young man took it over with his wife. They had a Friend of the Farmer in Irving Place in New York City. And They built another one. They took over the luncheonette after the gentleman who owned it, Rudy Bernardo, who was actually president of the Landmarks, president of the uh, 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 company that, that did all the shoppers, business, the business organization in Roslyn.
Oh, like a
That
Chamber of Commerce
Yeah,
type thing,
it wasn't really Chamber of Commerce. It was just
or something like that.
more like all the merchant society.
Oh,
So
okay.
Rudy died, and these kids took it over. They built it, and uh, and it was a wonderful breakfast place, a wonderful breakfast place. But there was enough size, and it was a rectangular room so that I could throw a stage in.
Hmm.
I could seat 400 people. So I did about 16 shows there,
I
with
saw.
permission of
Yeah.
the Village of Roslyn, because the Village of Roslyn had created a moratorium on live music after they threw me out,
Ah,
which might be something you might want to talk about because I don't talk about it too often.
okay. I'd like to hear about it.
All right. So consider yourself lucky because I don't very much talk about this.
Okay, good.
But in
This is an exclusive.
1987, the last show for the club was in May,
Who
and
was the last band to
it
play
was
my
Tower of
father's?
Power,
Oh, okay.
sitting across the street while they arrested me for insufficient parking.
Oh,
I couldn't really cancel the show. I had paid too much money in deposits, and I had to get some of my money back, and so there was no way of canceling it. So I was told not to do any more shows by the courts, and I did, and that was it. So they wanted to put me in jail, but cops didn't put me in jail. But I was told I could never do another show, or I'd go away for a significant amount of time.
wow.
So that was it. Now, what led up to that was this: that I kept getting summonses. The club opened in 1971. It was a bowling alley in Roslyn. And the gentleman who owned the bowling alley was a gentleman named J. Brianlenahan. J. Brian Aloysius Lenahan, who was a bartender from San Francisco, who bartended when the big earthquake happened in, what it was, 19 whatever.
1908 or whatever it
I
was.
don't know. I'd be guessing if I told you.
Hmm.
But he came here from Arizona and took over a bowling alley that was closed. I took over a factory that was supposed to be the first automated bread company where they would have Ferris wheels in the oven and you put the bread in. So that was the first, and that's how they make bread today.
Right.
But there was a gentleman who, during World War II, came up with the idea. And after the war, he went right into that building. That was a Ford dealership built in 1920 something, and he started making bread, and he died of a heart attack. So J. Brian Aloysius Lenahan built a bowling alley in that building, and he would do country western music on the lanes, because soon after he built the bowling alley in 52, 53, AMF invented automated pin setting and the holes in the ball. Now, before that, and I'm sure you know this, that the bowling didn't have holes in it. It
I
was called
didn't know.
10 pin. It was 10 pin.
I didn't know
And,
that.
and you'd
I know
hold it
they
in your
had pin
hand and
setters, but
roll it down. And they had pin boys, not pin setters, but pin
pin
boys.
boys.
Yeah, and they'd pick the pins up and put them back up, and only 10, not 12. When AMF invented the automatic pin setting, they also put the holes in the balls, and they added two more strikers, two
Wow.
more pins. So that sort of killed everyone that was in the bowling business. And there were many, many bowling alleys all over the world. It was a
Mm.
very popular game, started in Ireland
Mm.
or Scotland, but I think Ireland. So Jay founded that all the league business he had was going to Manhasset to that was the closest bowling alley. And so he started doing something he knew about, which was to put country western bands on a little stage and let people do the two-step right on the bowling alleys. And so that I'd walk into the club and I'd look at the pictures in the bar and I'd see Tammy Wynette
Wow.
and Tommy Cash, Johnny Cash's brother, Loretta Lynn,
Wow.
and all the other twangers. I can't remember all of them because I really didn't know that music. So I only remember pictures, but I mean, it goes on and on. Waylon Jennings
Wow.
was on there. And then actually Jay did book when he was getting ready to retire. He did book, I booked Waylon Jennings for him, even though no one was there.
Mm-hmm.
Because all those people that listened to country western in the 50s and early 60s, they all moved to Florida, or they were in homes, or they were all dead, And so anyway, I'm digressing from the story I was going to tell you, and I want to not go too far into depth because your audience isn't going to give a shit about anything I'm talking about. I started getting summonses from the village of Roslyn saying that I was operating a place of public assembly with insufficient parking. And what that meant is that all the parking under the viaduct was that, remember, you'd go and you'd park under the viaduct and the
Yes.
birds would
And you
shit
had to
on.
walk and walk
Yeah,
and
you had
walk.
the pigeons shitting on your car. And so there were about 250 parking spots under the viaduct. And so they said, sorry, you can't operate anymore. You don't have enough parking. And then they brought me in and they said, you can't do it. And I said, well, can I seat less people? Because the state of New York said you can seat 475 people in 100 standing room based on the occupancy, which was the egress, the doors, and the square footage that was actually in the 7,000 square feet upstairs. So really what happened, and I found out about it much later in my life, that 10 years later after they closed me, that the village of Roslyn wanted a the people that own the Mid-Island Plaza and the South Shore Mall to open up a regional shopping center in Roslyn, which they started to do, which would have been disastrous for the village of Roslyn.
Mm.
So they didn't ever finish it because I in part with Diane from Diane's Bakery and others Stop and Shop, Stop Edwards, Stop the regional shopping center.
Mm.
So it's unfortunate, but club closed. The last show was in May, I think early May, maybe the 3rd or the 4th, with Tower of Power. And I spent about two years in the courts in the village of Roslyn, pleading with them to let me run the club. And they had already taken too much money from the developers in the Mid-Island Plaza and the South Shore Mall. So they couldn't let me operate. So the club closed. And then to make matters worse, the people that owned the building at 19 Bryan Avenue, where my father's place was, they ripped down a third of the building in the backyard so that it could never be used again. So
what is it now?
it's been broken up into some small retail stores.
Mm.
But if you go to buy Diane's Bakery and go in the backyard, you can see what the kids today call the Wailing Wall, because this what's left of the wall that was in that portion of the building, which was right above where the drummer sat. That part of the building, it's the rest of it's all gone.
Right.
So there was building behind where the drummer sat on the backstage, but about a third of the building is gone. But they left like the last few, bricks up, so you can actually touch the bricks, just like
Oh,
the Wailing
wow.
Wall in Israel.
Touched the same bricks that Max Weinberg touched when he,
or any other drummer you
or
want.
any other drummer that was there.
So,
Wow, that's
so
a great
that's
story.
that's it. So I was out of business for 30 some odd years
Wow.
until we decided to bring the ghost back and try to do a show in the ballroom of the Roslyn Hotel.
Which I got to say, I've been there a number of times. You've been really nice to me, letting me open up for some
Well,
bands.
we enjoy having you there. You're a
Thank
great
you.
talent.
Oh, thank you. And it's a beautiful place. The sound and the lighting, it's perfect. It's perfect. And when you come back, and you will. Now tell me a little bit about, you have a TV show or something coming on,
No,
TC?
I don't have a TV show.
I saw something on
There
your
are several
website.
things in the works.
Okay.
One is a documentary that's been worked on for 6 years
I've been hearing
about
about
the
that.
history of my father's place.
Right.
And it's not about me; it's about the club, and it would come out sooner, but because of the pandemic, everything slowed down.
Mm.
I also wrote a script, which is in Hollywood. I'm not allowed to talk about it, but it's a situation comedy based on a nightclub,
Oh, that's great.
based on an old man who lost his club and wanted to go back to work.
That
And
sounds familiar.
trials and tribulations of what happens in the music industry being a concert club owner.
I can
So that,
only imagine what kind of stories you have. Can you
well,
share
it's
one?
not only, yeah, I'll share the one I told you I'd share about the Ramones.
Okay, great.
Right? Because I
I
like
love it.
continuity for your show.
And I'm a Ramones fan, so this will be
Okay.
fun.
So at the time, the Ramones were unknown to us. Um, they hadn't even really played CBGBs yet. The CBGBs wasn't open yet.
Okay.
All
I will
right.
have to go back and edit that in post production. I didn't know
Okay.
that, but I'm learning. I'm learning.
Okay. So there was a magazine called 16, and the publisher of that magazine was obsessed with the band, as was Linda Stein Beagle, whose husband was Seymour Stein Beagle, but he changed his name to Seymour Stein.
Seymour Stein, Sire Records.
He'll probably get upset if he hears me using the name Stein Beagle. So he changed it legally.
Is he
Seymour
still
was a
alive, by the way? Is he still
Yes, he
alive?
is. Yes, he
Okay,
is.
good.
And my hat goes off to him because he had the brilliance of taking all of those acts that no other record company would sign, and
Mhm.
he'd give them a chance.
Yeah.
And so many of them
Oh,
became superstars.
yes.
So
Madonna.
many.
Look at
What?
Madonna.
That's right. And this man, I think, was partners with Linda Stein. I'm not sure of a relationship between them, and I can't remember his name, but you guys can look it up. Who was publisher of 16 magazine? You can figure it out. And so it was a favor for him. And he was going to do an article on 16 magazine and on my father's place, which was sort of cool, even though his kids weren't old enough to get in the bar.
Yeah.
So the band came in the afternoon to do sound check, and they all had holes in their jeans, in their knees. Just thought, how is that possible that they all have? What are they? In a cult? I mean, it was so weird that they all had no knees
Right.
on their fabric of their jeans. All Joey, Dee Dee, Marky, etc. Anyway, and
Right.
then the roadies didn't have them either. So they got up and they played, and they sound checked in the afternoon, and they were so loud, it was so piercing that I couldn't hear, nor could I hear for a day or two afterwards. But my dad came to pick me up to take me to the country club because I was a country club rat, and he said my dad couldn't hear. He was leaving when they stopped playing, and he walked back downstairs to yell at them. He says, "Why do you kids have to play so fucking loud?" Can I say "fuck" on your show?
Yeah.
Anyway, and Joey whips off his sunglasses, just like says, didn't know it was my dad. He whips off his sunglasses. He goes, "We want all of our fans' ears to bleed, sir." My father was dumbfounded. He was walking up. I was walking behind him. He was leaving. His ears were ringing.
Yeah.
And I said, "Bye, Dad." And then, sorry. And then the kids say to me, Joey and Dee Dee say to me, "We want our pizza." I said, "Well, tell me what you want in your pie. I'll order it for you." No, we want to get it ourselves. I said, "The pizzeria is right around the block. Just go there. Here's money." They said, "We don't need money. We'll go get our own pizzas." And so I see these 5 guys, whatever it was, because they had a roadie with them. And they're walking down the road, and I'm dumbfounded, and my ears are ringing. And
Bleeding.
I answer the phone at the front door, which I usually don't do. So I answer the phone in the office. But I was so broken, shaken up from the loudness.
Yeah.
I go, "My father's place." This girl answers the phone, and she says, "Can I talk to Joey Ramone, please?" I said, the guys just left to go get pizza." She says, "You don't understand. I need to fuck Joey Ramone." Excuse me? She says, "I need to fuck Joey Ramone." I said, "Well, I'm sure these guys have no boyfriends. Just come down and I'll introduce you to them." She says, "No, you don't understand. I'm 16 years old and I live in Far Rockaway." I said, "Well, you're too young to come in the club. And certainly, I don't know how you're going to get here anyway. I'd let you in if you didn't drink." And she started screaming hysterically, "Listen, I'll fuck you. I'll fuck whoever you want. I need to fuck Joey Ramone." I hung up the phone. But as I hung it up, I realized, boy, these guys sucked. And I did a favor for someone for them to play. Mistake. But if they get this kind of obsession and this kind of cult, like
Right.
what's going on right now, and I don't want to talk about it,
Right.
I really should come back and see what they're all about. So
Right.
I came back. There were maybe 27, 28 kids holding signs that said "Gabba Gabba Hey," and they all knew the songs. They're all going, "Lobotomy, Gabba," yeah. And so I said, this could turn into something.
Yes.
This could turn into something.
And
So
it
I gave
did.
them another show,
Mhm.
and then the record came out. LAR started playing them. The rest is history. They would have
Yeah.
been the biggest band in the world. Everyone is emulating them all over
Mhm.
the world.
Mhm.
Their particular brand of music, which I call the Bizarro Beach Boys, if you read Bizarro
Right.
comics.
New York Beach Boys, I used to call them. But same thing. Yeah. Punk rock. I loved it.
So that's it. That's my story about the Ramones.
That's a great story. So you had a lot of foresight. Are there other bands that you
I had
think
no foresight. There was a record out, and
and
I
they
would put the
played?
record in. I really wasn't that good with foresighting. The acts that I liked usually bombed. So I'm not going to say that I had foresight. And everyone who says I did, I'm telling them right now, you're all full of shit. I didn't have any
Yeah, well,
foresight.
maybe you just got lucky.
No, I didn't get lucky because we had a lot of acts that bombed, but you don't remember the ones that bombed.
Of
And what
course.
was that band called?
Yeah. I mean, what did you have?
Dildos. Well, remember that
6,000?
band, the Dildos? You know, the thing is that you only remember the ones
the
that
ones that made
became
it.
huge.
Exactly. That makes sense. That makes sense. And you had such a diverse uh, amount of. I mean, you had Livingston Taylor, David Bromberg, and then you had the Ramones. I mean, there was no limit to what side of the spectrum you would be on, and I think that's what
I
made it
was
so unique.
I was a general practitioner, as
Mhm.
clubs of old, the way the bottom line, I'm sorry, the way the bitter end ran, the way the clubs in LA ran, like, clubs on the strip. One night would be folk music, next night would be punk rock. It didn't matter. It's music.
Right. Exactly.
Jazz, rock, blues, comedy, folk,
Yeah.
reggae. Do it all.
Yeah. That was great. Now, was there
You
was
know, I
there
just want you to know, sir,
what's that?
comics didn't play my club unless I had a record out. There were many comics. The comics could open up for a headliner.
Right.
I did a show with a gentleman at CW Post at the Tiller Center. And I went backstage to shake his hand. They had just given him $15,000 to play. He
Mm.
sold out, and his name was Jay Leno. I said,
Wow.
Jay, I never met you before. Thanks so much for playing here at the Tiller Center. He says, what are you talking about, Eppy? I played at my father's place. I opened up for Southside Johnny. You paid me $50. So, I mean, everyone got a chance to play as an opener,
Right.
but you didn't headline as a comic at my father's place unless you had a comedy album.
Now, did you ever
And
have
this is
George
something that
Carlin? Did you ever have
Carlin
George
played
Carlin?
because he had an album
Oh,
out.
he did
Yes,
play there. Okay.
that's right.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, because he worked for Flip Wilson. He was
That's
one.
right.
He was the head writer for the Flip Wilson show.
That's
So
correct.
Flip Wilson helped him produce Class Clown, which was his first album.
I think
It's something we
AM/FM,
should talk
AM/FM
about.
might have been before that, but that's all
I'm
right.
sorry,
AM/FM, I think, was his first album.
I may be wrong. Are you sure? I am wrong.
It's
AMFM was his
okay.
first album.
I don't
Best
want to correct
television.
you, but that's all right.
No, you're right, and I'm sorry because I'm not the
don't be
smartest guy in the world.
don't be
But this
sorry.
is something we should talk about for a minute because I feel in the very near future, it should stop right now. I'm sorry about the
That's all
phone.
right.
That's in the other room. I left it in the other room. I feel there are now 4 streaming networks that you can get in your car to hear comedy. I know that Sirius and the affiliates of Sirius Satellite have 4 separate channels, but there are also other companies that are competing with Sirius and hold on, you'll have to edit this. Hello, I gotta call you back. I'm doing an interview. Sorry, can you
That's
edit that
okay.
out?
Nah, don't
Or
worry
you can
about it.
leave it in. It doesn't
It
matter.
makes it real. It makes it.
All right.
You're a busy man.
So I don't know all the names of the companies, but if you rent a car, because no one buys cars anymore, everyone leases them. Part of the lease deal is they give you free subscription based radio to listen
Right.
to.
Hmm.
So there is a supply and a demand right now, as there was in the 70s and 80s for recordings of comics.
Hmm.
But the problem is getting a good recording in a club.
Yeah.
And there
Very
are
hard.
some clubs that before the pandemic that were starting to do this. But I think it's going to be a big business. The
Hmm.
fact that people will be able to record their vignettes and then they could be played on a radio show. And this is how comics became big in the early days before HBO and Showtime, Cinemax, the movie channel,
Hmm.
where all the cable companies for interstitial material meaning music, entertainment in between the two programs, and they would throw a comic on for 5 minutes. So that this is going to be big again, and that more and more comedy content will be able to be recognized because most of the people listen to these things when they're driving in their automobiles.
That's true. That's true. It's very true. Or they're streaming on Spotify or whatever service they might use, and that's also a big streaming service is Spotify.
Right, but I'm
Um,
talking about
you're talking about
the
radio
actual
FM,
gags that you don't have to necessarily not necessarily see it, but you
right?
can hear it.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yes, You know, because people don't have the attention to watch your
No,
whole bit about going to the beach.
right.
It probably the kids won't listen to the whole thing because they don't.
Well, I'm glad you remembered it. That's all that
I
matters.
love it.
Thank you.
I enjoy it every time you do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me ask you this. Back in those days, like you had the bottom line, you had CBGBs, Maxes. Was there a camaraderie between the clubs or was there competition? Or I mean, if you played the police and the police went somewhere else, was it a friendly?
Are you talking about New York?
Yeah.
New York had nothing to do with my father's
Okay.
place.
So it really
I
didn't.
was another. I was on the other side of the river.
Yeah, you could have
We
been
were
in,
another land. We were
you
another
could have been
city.
in Russia
We
for
were
all I
another
know.
city state in the Grecian Empire. It
So there
didn't
was
matter.
no real
The bottom
competition.
line was the closest thing to my father's place.
Right. It
Henceforth,
was.
I could split a week up with the bottom line. We could do the Flo and Eddie Christmas reunion, and they could do 2 nights, and I could do 2 nights, and it wouldn't make any difference. In
Okay.
some cases, we'd buy an ad in the Times together and say the bottom line, these dates, my father's place, these dates,
Okay. So it
because
was just
we really didn't hurt each other. And the
that's
reason I
good.
know this is this: we did. LAR was playing a song called "Popsicle Toes" by Dave
Michael Franks
and David Sanborn,
and David Sanborn, correct.
right? And that because of that, we started playing the whole album, and it
Mm.
became a big deal. Michael Franks became a big deal, but he was also a big deal on NEW.
Yeah.
So what would happen is they'd be using NEW, and we'd be using LAR. We didn't hurt each other, so we would sell out 2 nights, 4 shows with with uh, with Michael Franks, and so would the bottom line using
Oh,
NEW.
okay. Well,
So
that's
so
good.
it didn't matter. So we block booked. So you come to New York, you do 2 nights in the bottom line, 2 nights at my father's place.
Okay.
As far as the punk rock bands are concerned, um, I think they were all in competition, and everyone was fighting to get the acts that had a following. Except the ones the clubs that got the acts are the ones that would cater to the acts, like Max's Kansas City. That's
Mhm.
where every record company did their press parties in the afternoon. So that was a cool place. But CBGB's was a dump.
It
But
was.
the thing was is that all these acts that started out there felt a commitment to play for Hilly. And so even when they got big, even when those acts, got big, Michael Stipes or Patti Smith, no matter how big they got, they'd still go back and play for Hilly Crystal, which I,
Mhm.
I respected and appreciated.
Yeah, well, it was a loyalty, I guess, and that's nice that was around back then. That's good. Okay. So what's on the horizon now for my father's place at the Rosslyn Hotel? Are you going to
There
come
is
back
no
this spring?
horizon. There is only death,
No,
and
no, don't
we can't.
say that.
We can't talk about it because, I don't want to do any shows there because I personally was miserable there
Oh,
from the day we opened up. I was not happy because the capacity was too small, and we were losing money every month we were operating.
uh,
So I don't know if the club's going to operate in the same configuration that we did before.
are you looking for a different location?
I am not.
Okay. Are you
We,
retiring?
we I'm not retiring. I'm far from retiring.
Okay.
The club is being used to do live pay-per-views. The kids call it streaming. I
Right.
won't because streaming they think it's free. You got to pay for it. There's a company called Veeps. V is in Victor, EEPS. It's
Okay.
the members of Sweet Charlotte, Good Charlotte, and the gentleman who owned Brown Paper Ticket. And
Okay.
they will promote. They've hired all these publicists from Portland to San Francisco, and they promote every city, Christchurch, New Zealand, and then they go to every city in Australia. They go to Africa, South America, North America, Canada. They promote in every city when I do a stream. If you young people would go to myfathersplace.com, you'll see the streams that we're doing. However, all the streams that we were doing, I canceled because everyone was getting sick. So now the first show will be on Mother's Day with Mountain featuring Corky Lang, because Corky Lang has taken the baton from Leslie West since he died last week,
Hmm.
and the band show still goes on.
Oh, great.
he bought this. He bought the name Mountain from Leslie West years ago, and so this is nothing new. Was sick for years before he died.
Yeah, I had heard.
So that's in the first show. I also have a show with members of Aerosmith, and there might be more members coming with a young band from Massachusetts called Draw the Line, and they are the only official tribute band for Aerosmith. And at one point, uh, if Steve Tyler can't play, the lead singer of this band gets up and he plays Steve Tyler, and no one even knows it, which really pisses me off. If you paid $600 to go to the Centrum in Worcester, Massachusetts to see Aerosmith, you want to see fucking Steve Tyler,
Of
not some
course.
kid who looks like But that's what they do. So,
Wow.
so that's one of the shows, and then we're going to do Billy Joel's band called Lords of 52nd Street,
Hmm.
and those are all the members that played with Billy, and maybe Billy will show up and play piano. I don't think so, but Richie Canada, his saxophone player, thinks that he will.
Wow. That's terrific.
Richie and Jimmy was his name. Jimmy Webb is going to play my piano live, and there'll be other shows. I've asked Kenny Laguna, who manages Joan Jett, to do one, but Kenny Laguna hasn't left his house since May. I'm sorry, since January. So yeah, everyone's afraid of getting sick.
Yeah.
So we have to wait until there's more needles being stuck in people's arms before we can think about where my father's place will be, or if there will ever be my father's place.
And probably not till the summer.
But the club doesn't work for me for 180 seats. It really doesn't.
Right.
And unless we can figure out a way of expanding the capacity, I really don't think that we should have opened up there to begin with.
Well, you tried, and I thought it was
Well, the
beautiful.
thing is, there are too many rooms on Long Island that hold 400 and more people.
Yeah.
So I have trouble buying talent. And for every act that I book in the club, I've tried to book 6 other acts that pass to go somewhere else. And to me, it's too heartbreaking to promote that way.
Right.
The other beauty about doing shows on television is that when we do these pay-per-views, I can have Jim Faith, who runs the Bay Festival.
Right. Great South Bay Festival. Yes.
Yeah, he could be a promoter on my shows on television, and I can give him 30% of the shows because I'm not competing with him to sell tickets. Where before, an act that I want to play in the club, I couldn't play because they are going to play at the Great South Bay Music Festival. So you see, it doesn't really matter. So that we can team up, and I can team up with promoters all over the world, every country, every state, every city.
Well, that's pretty interesting.
Very
so
exciting.
you're just redirecting your efforts.
Yeah, I give every promoter 30% of what we're making.
Yeah, that's
just
great.
by them pressing a button. We did a show with Chief Fury because he was afraid to travel because he was sick, because it was during the sickness. And he said, "I'm canceling the tour," but he decided to do one of these pay-per-views from his back porch. And he allowed every promoter that was on the tour that he canceled to be able to be a contributor, and they get their own account number from Veeps. And what we did was we press a button on all of our database, and we made $500 doing nothing. Just one shot. If I knew we were going to make that much money, I would have promoted it for a couple of months. So there's money to be made, and I don't have to promote the show. I could, if someone else is doing a show with the police in London, and they say, "Do you want to promote it?" I would gladly promote it for 30%.
Wow! So it's like you're buying stock in the show.
That's right. Exactly. It's what I call an effort that is it's a concerted effort.
Right.
Because everyone's working towards the same thing.
Right. And the people are getting to see what they like, and they don't have to leave their house.
In the past, if a promoter gets a date on Bruce Springsteen or Billy Joel, he only makes 10%. That's all a promoter makes. The rest of it goes to the band anyway. So 30% is cool.
Yeah.
Sky's the limit. there's no. I'm sorry, we ran out of seats. That doesn't happen. You
No.
know, you can have as many seats as you want in the sky.
Wow. That's really
So,
fascinating.
that might be the saving grace for
Right.
doing shows at the Roslyn Hotel. Is that we are able to develop this screaming streaming format of doing pay-per-views. And if you can't get to see Livingston Taylor because you had to go to take care of the grandchildren, well, you can watch it that night from wherever you are
Right.
for
Right.
$5. So there are applications that make it interesting, and we have to thank the Chinese for giving us the disease so that we find out about it.
Oh.
So thank you very much.
Oh yeah, that's one way to put it. So, and what is this called? Veeps, Veeps?
VEEPS is a
Okay.
streaming platform run by concert promoters, artists, promoters, managers, people in the music industry. They're not IT people. They're people that are in the concert business, just like me,
Wow.
just like you.
That was really fascinating. Well, listen, Epi, I think, do you have any closing remarks? Because I think we went a little long, but that's all
Yeah,
right. I
everyone
love
should
talking
wear
to
a
you.
mask.
But in my house, wear a
No, I'm
mask?
saying when you go out,
Of course, I always do. You too.
when you go out, wear
You
a
didn't
mask.
catch anything. You didn't get sick, did you?
I think I did,
Really?
but the problem is that I got sick in January.
Hmm.
Doing a show in the afternoon with a local band, and I started feeling very weak. I went into bed that afternoon. I couldn't get up for 4 days. On the fourth day, I went to the doctor. He gave me a swab, and he called me the next day to say I have influenza.
Oh,
Well, I am not an influenza kind of guy. You have to be a smoker. You have to be an asthmatic. You have to be terribly obese. I am not morbidly obese. I'm just fat. So, so I'm not really the kind of guy that gets influenza.
right.
But I'm guessing. This is a guess. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry to offend any of your listeners, but I think what happens is the people that look at these pictures under a microscope of my swab and then match them up with pictures in a book are from BOCES.
Yeah.
And if you go look at COVID-19 and then look at influenza or the Spanish flu, call it whatever you want,
Hmm.
there's really very little difference
Hmm.
to the naked eye, you know?
Hmm.
So it's quite possible
And
that
back in
we
January,
thought
they didn't know what it
no one
was.
knew it. We thought Corona was a beer,
Yeah.
you know?
Well,
I
I
have no
wish you.
parting words. Thank you for bringing me on your show.
Oh, this was
And
really
I hope
fascinating.
everyone stays safe. And the next time we see everyone will be live, not
That would
memory.
be great. That would be great. Thank you so much, Epi, for
You're
coming
welcome,
on.
sir.
And I will send you this link, and hopefully you'll post it, and we can get some
I'll be
viewers.
more than happy to do that.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you so much,
Bye,
Epi.
everyone.
Really great.
See you
Thanks.
later.